This is part one of my Jeep YJ project. This Jeep came from Florida and was a victim of Hurricane Michael last year. I bought it here in Ohio because it had no rust, which is a big deal around this part of the country where most vehicles don't last about 10 or 11 years without getting some serious rust issues. So although this Jeep was damaged from the flood, it's in good shape otherwise. From what I could tell, this Jeep was underwater above the roll bars, but nobody attempted to start it or drive it afterwards. So basically I got it full of seaweed and sand, as you would expect something from a hurricane flooding would have. The frame is in great shape. Some of the problem areas on the CJs and YJs back here around the rear spring hangers, this frame is in great shape in those spots. And there's only a few spots to touch up inside the rear shock mounts. There's no drain under this bracket, so some rust has started inside, but that can easily be cleaned out with an air chisel and then sealed before I paint it. I did cut off the motor mounts for the 2.5 four-cylinder that was in it, and I did that to make room for a Chevy 5.3 that came out of a 2004 Suburban. This is the model with the throttle by wire, and it had about 150,000 miles on it. So I plan to have this rebuilt, and when I bought this from the scrapyard, I also got all the accessories, the manifolds, which hopefully I could use, but I probably will not be able to, mass airflow sensor, starter, and wire harness as well, and sensors. So I was able to get everything for the engine. I plan to use a AX15 Jeep 5-speed manual transmission, which is right there. Because this was a 4-cylinder Jeep originally, it came with an AX5, which is not really strong enough to be put behind something like this. So that AX15 will mount to the back of this using, right now my plan is to run a Novak adapters, Chevy bell housing to AX15 adapter plate. And this bell housing here is just a standard GM manual small block bell housing, I think off of a truck, so it's equipped to handle the bigger size flywheel. And behind the AX15, I will keep the NP231 transfer case. This is the one that came out of the flooded Jeep, and it's a real testament to how well these are built and the quality of components, that even though most of this was full of water when I got it, once I drained the water out and cleaned all the parts, everything cleaned up really well. Even the bearings have no rust or pitting on them, and that's the difference with an American bearing versus an import bearing. So even the bearing here pressed into the case half is in great shape, so I'll be able to reuse it. But I'll also run a slip yoke eliminator to shorten the transmission and make it easier for me to run a lift. And right now I'm leaning towards like a 2.5 inch lift, but I'm not totally sure yet. For the rear ends, in the front, I'm going to keep the Dana 30 and I'll rebuild it with 355 gears, and also I plan to replace the Posi Lock vacuum actuated four-wheel drive system. I plan to replace that with the Posi Lock with a cable instead of the vacuum. So I'll go over that when I get to that point. I kept the front suspension parts just to have them for a frame of reference when I buy the new stuff. But I do plan to use all aftermarket front traction bar, drag links, and sway bar ends, steering stabilizer, and all that should be new heavy duty stuff. And then for the rear end, I'm running a Ford 8.8 out of an Explorer. This seems to be the rear end of choice for these Jeeps. This was originally out of an Explorer, like I said, but the previous owner had it behind a Jeep Cherokee, so I had to cut his brackets off so I could weld new YJ brackets on. So that'll be a project in itself right there with those two rear ends. I'll retain the factory skid plate. I was going to put in a new cross member, but the bolts came out of the frame surprisingly well. These here. So I'll reuse this. In fact, the riveted nuts on the bottom of the frame are still in great shape. I ran a tap through them, and there's no problems with them at all. That's one of the benefits of finding a southern vehicle for a project like this. And then finally, here's the body. So the body is in great shape. Again, that could be attributed to never having to see road salt. Here in Ohio, we don't typically get that luxury. Most of our vehicles are destroyed by road salt. But this is fun working on a car that is this old with no rust. And I say that with a caveat because there is a little bit of rust right here in the front half of the bulkhead. There's a brace that runs along the dash. And on that side you can see it right in front of the door hinge. And that brace runs down right to behind the last letter of the Jeep logo. Well, water tends to trap itself down there, and in this one, unfortunately, it did that. So on this side, you can see in the reflection there's some spots where the rust is starting to transition through the paint. That was clearly, it looks like this was repainted sometime in the past. And you have a lot of pack out because the rust is bulging out and it's pushing the panel out. So my plan is to replace, probably starting here on the rocker, and if I get lucky, I'll be able to just go up to where this factory weld is and save the J in the Jeep and replace this portion. The factory panels come up higher, the replacement panels come up higher, but all the ones I've seen so far do not have the embossed Jeep logo. So I'm going to do everything I can to try and save this. But ultimately, I'm at the mercy of the rust. If there is any kind of spots here, I'm just going to cut this out. And the other side, although it's not this bad, it still has the same type of pack out from the rust. The firewall's in good shape. There's no rust on it. And here's the pack out on this side as well. You can see it right behind that factory weld, that spot weld. It's bulged out, like right here, and that's why that weld looks like it's so deep. Because that weld is basically holding in the sheet metal. So I'll replace both sides the same way. But the rest of the body is in fantastic shape. The floor pans, the rear, inside wheel wells, there's no rust. Just a little bit of surface rust from sitting outside, but nothing like we're used to here in Ohio. And this firewall, because I'm going with the 5.3 and getting rid of air conditioning, I really want to simplify this as much as I can. Certain holes you have to keep, of course, like this is a hand for the blower, hole for the blower motor. I think these are the holes for the heater core, and then these would have been, maybe these are the heater core and this was for the air conditioner, I forget. But whatever I don't plan on reusing, I'd like to smooth off. So I have to go through this and go over my pictures to see what I can get rid of. I know, like this is the steering, and this was a bulkhead connector for like the wire harness, so I'll get rid of it. I'll just try to clean it up as much as possible, because you really, when you open the hood, you see all this up down to like right here. And this is where the brackets are that hold on the fenders. And on this side, this is where the battery is mounted, I believe. So you don't see most of this. I think from here down, I'll have to look at my pictures again to remember. But anything I see, I would like to clean up. And who knows what happened. Looks like someone put some aftermarket holes in this too, so I'll try to smooth it as much as possible. And my goal with this project is just to build a Jeep that I can drive reliably, not have to worry about, have it nice and quiet, and perfectly reliable. I really don't want to have to build this once and then keep tinkering with it. I look at this project as this will probably be the only Jeep I ever build, so I want to make it right from the start. And if that means, you know, this project takes the better part of a year, well, that's fine. Because for me, that's most fun I have is when I'm working on these projects. And you can see like the back of this is all, I mean, it's dinged up and scratched, but there's no rust holes, which is a nice breath of fresh air around here. I might even try to, I really can't keep that because I gotta sandblast it, but it's neat to see that. Right up until it was flooded, someone was driving it out on the beach. So if you believe vehicles have a soul, that's kind of cool to see. Well, I'll make this video short. My intentions are to make this a video series with different parts covering different aspects of the project, similar to how I did my Alice Chalmers C tractor restoration, that John Deere back there, and a bunch of my other projects. This way, if somebody has a question or needs advice about something, hopefully you can help them out. And if you're out there and you've done a project like this before, and if you think I'm doing something wrong, just please speak up, because free advice is absolutely worth it. So if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to ask, and thanks for watching.